Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast, the official podcast of Pineland, broadcasting to you from an undisclosed location deep inside Pineland, where we discuss faith, family, finances, firearms, freedom, food, and everything else in between, with those who believe in living free and living out the values that made this country free. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Pinelander Podcast. My name is Paul LeFevre. I'm here with my Ranger buddy, Mike Blackburn, and today is Friday, 15 July 2022. We are just trucking through this year. It's, I think, statistically halfway done, and we are privileged to actually get one of our authors back onto the podcast, Pete Crittenden, who had a hot podcast, episode 21, Survival Mindset. That came out on the 29th of April. If you haven't heard that yet, after you listen to this, make sure you hit that.
Treat yourself.
Yes. So in addition to having the late night FM radio voice,
That's right,
and being a barrel-chested freedom fighter and an expert in the field of survival, Pete Crittenden is also the author of Survival Mindset. Let's see if I can get that out. Of course, we're privileged to offer this book through Blacksmith Publishing, and it is subtitled A Guide on What to Do When Things Go Wrong. And so, Pete, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and it's exciting. I'm excited because you have so many things. When we're privileged to host this, but I learn a lot. Every podcast, I'm getting something. And they say you learn a lot when you teach. I learn a lot when I listen to experts like you. And today, I think we're going to be looking at survival in the survival mindset category, and we're looking at personal security, situational awareness, something like that. Is that right, Pete?
Yes, sir. That's at least 1/3 of the subject that's covered in the book.
Kind of an important topic so that you don't become a statistic, right? Kind of a big deal.
Exactly right.
And just before you get started, something I always like to say is when I go out of the house, I'm a one-man PSD. I'm the guy that is head on a swivel, staying in the yellow, looking at potential threats, scanning the environment, looking at behavioral patterns, looking at baselines, anomalies, all that good stuff. And I know that you're going to add a lot to that type of mindset.
Yes, well, quite. You and I, of course, have a similar background. We served together over there in Stuttgart at one point in the Commanders in Extremis Force.
Yeah,
and
buddy.
as part of that training, we were absolutely the eyes and ears on the ground in a lot of dangerous neighborhoods. And we always had tremendous situational awareness. Our radar was on. We were on high alert. And of course, that's part of the nature of the game, is our job to observe, but it was also the fact that we were armed. Now, let's take that into the situation of your average citizen, your average person. You may or may not be armed, and it may or may not be to your advantage to be armed. And heaven forbid you ever have to use a weapon, because then suddenly you've got a very complex situation. But people do ask me, what is it that I do? I have to go into a sketchy neighborhood. I have to stop at the gas station, and what happens if I'm encountered, by a pair of thugs or something? And the answer is not easy. First of all, I'd say if you don't have to be there, that's the best thing. So one of the tricks of the trade that we used to practice in Europe in challenging environments over there, never let the gas tank go under half.
Yeah.
That way, you're not running low in the bad part of town. So if you're not there, then of course, bad, evil cannot come to you. Okay, so let's say for whatever reason you are in a challenging environment, you've got your radar on, you've got to be aware of what's going on in your surroundings, 360 degrees and up. But of course, you don't want to be turning your head over the back of your shoulder every 5 minutes and looking like you're like something that doesn't belong there. You don't want to. The old thing of being in a new city and looking all around and you stand out as a guy from out of town. That's what you want to avoid. Another thing to do is the cell phone. Nowadays, a lot of people are on the smartphone continually, even as they're walking down the street. Bad practice right there, because while you're doing it, you're focused on the smartphone. I'm surprised that we're not seeing more people have those things snatched out of their hands. The advice under those circumstances is, if you must consult your smartphone, go into a sanctuary area, like a coffee shop, a hotel lobby, a bank lobby, a large business of some type. And then, go to where you got your back against the wall, and you can consult your smartphone in relative safety.
Hey, Pete, I just wanted to, and that's a great point. I just wanted to exfoliate myself just for a second. I was kind of tarted out when I was driving, and I think I can say that these days, but I was in Uganda, and I was definitely not doing what you were just saying. I was totally spaced out. I was riding shotgun. I had my cell phone in my hand. The door was not locked. And then as we kind of queued up to go through a red light, this joker just came out of the woods, opened the door, and then tried to grab my cell phone. And he would have gotten it had I not punched him in the hand repeatedly. And then the light turned and we kind of gunned it with the guy halfway out of the door. But definitely. If you can, prevention is the best cure. Thinking through those, red hatting this stuff. That's a great point.
Well, I'll tell you something that I thought of, and it's we've all had that friend, that guy that comes in and he's like, man, you won't believe what just happened, and he goes into this crazy story. And they're awesome to hang out with these dudes because they've always got these crazy events that happen to them. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, am I square or something? There's nothing exciting that ever happens in my life. But this guy seems to have high adventure every weekend. And what you realize real quick is, and listen, we've all had that guy, right? It's like, hey, I wonder, what was Joe up to, last weekend? Because I know it's some crazy story. It involves liquor and nudity and a dog and all kinds of different things. And what you realize is really what you touched on, which is, if you back that story up to where it begins, and it kind of begins, sort of, innocent. But you're sitting there thinking, man, I never would have even been at that place.
Yeah.
And that's, but they always start like, wow, man, that's why nothing exciting has happened to me, because, I don't go there. And you really kind of brought that up. It's like the first thing you got to really be thinking about is where are you going? And what kind of place is that? I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure right off the get-go without even thinking about, how you're getting there, where you're going, why you're going there, what time are you going there, what type of alert level do you need to be at that location, a lot of this stuff, right?
Well, sooner or later, you can't avoid it. You're going to go to interfaces. Sooner or later, you're going to go through an airport. And the most dangerous part of the airport is when you're emerging in a brand new country and leaving the airport and getting some kind of transportation, because you can set yourself up for failure that way.
True.
And so what you want to do is you want to arrange your transportation prior to arrival. And the person who comes up and says, I'm your transportation, don't go with him immediately. Ask him where he's going to take you.
Yeah.
Because a common scam is a bad actor goes to the airport. He looks at the guy holding up the sign. It says for Mr. Peter. So he writes down Mr. Peter and gets in front of the line, and he'll apprehend, myself and take me. Now I'm with the wrong guy.
Yeah.
That is an actual scam. Okay. So, sooner or later you have to go through interfaces and you have to be aware of scams. Don't take the little green taxi in Mexico City. Those are the taxis for the Mexican people. Don't get in those taxis. Okay. Likewise, if you arrive in Bangkok and you're at the airport, have a plan for how you're going to get downtown. It's a long way to get downtown to your hotel. Don't be taking the little tuk-tuks or the local taxis until you're familiar with where you're going and you know how to tell them where you want to go and what you want to pay in Thai. They barter. They don't use the meter. They hate that. So, these are situational awareness things that you have to know. But you're right. Sooner or later, you're going to be in an interface. Sooner or later, you're in the car and you have to look at your cell phone. Just remember, when you're in the car, if you're not the driver, you're the co-driver. So you want to avoid the laptop and the cell phone as much as possible. Be another set of eyes and ears. Be a co-navigator. Know where you are at all times and where in the city you have to go to get out of where you're from. Excellent. If things go bad.
Yeah. Great point.
Know the general layout of the city.
And these are smart things too. I'm sitting there thinking, man, I need to be doing that even in the States.
Absolutely. This was, you remember that, Pete? We would color code. We actually had, we gave the streets in Sarajevo, code names, and then we had like little coded dots, and we knew we were passing said location, and we could use a code to pass that. But yeah, we knew the town that we operated in. And that's really your point, which is great. I mean, a lot of people, they just come and go to their house and go the same way, and then they're totally, shocked that somebody has set up an ambush. Yeah, and they just don't have no essay. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a very good point. I live out in the country. Okay, there's just a degree of security by being far away from people, but I always go and come back a different way out of habit. Yeah. Just for that reason. And that goes all the way back to Rogers Rangers rules. If you go one way, you come back a different way. So they saw you go. They're not setting up an ambush. No, and I'm not paranoid. They are out to get me. No, seriously, I do that. I do that for a couple of reasons. I like to have my finger on the pulse of, the patterns of activity that's happening in my area here. Oh, yeah. And by taking different roads and going all around, establishing that giant flower petal pattern, I'm doing an area recon, even if I'm just going up the street for a loaf of bread and a quart of milk.
Yeah. I mean, you can be lazy and just win the lotto and become a statistic. I mean, because I don't know how many times that, you just get in your car and somehow the car arrives to where you're going. You forgot all the turns you made and the lights you went through. But then, if something happened and, that's what people are counting on.
Well, I think, you touched on something too, which is, you develop, these things are just like second nature to you. For those out there that, think everything is fine, they don't need to worry about anything, they can just, play on the phone all day. It's going to take a little bit of training. I mean, you're going to have to start kind of leaning that way if you're, if you really want to take advantage of this, excellent advice. Just start out just trying different routes home. Try not to be time and place predictable, and then try something else once you get that. But you really have to kind of develop some good habits of kind of being alert and aware.
Exactly, and look for patterns, and also be aware of what's happening on the street. They taught this in the individual terrorist awareness course in the Army. They talked about General Dozier, who was kidnapped in Verona, Italy, back in '79, I believe it was, kidnapped by Red Brigade, communist terrorists. And for 3 days, he was aware that there were people sitting on a park bench opposite his apartment house. He saw the surveillance. He did nothing about it. Okay. The the terrorists came to his apartment the day before, posing as plumbers, and his wife let them in. Never mind the fact there was no call for a plumber, no word from the landlord. They came in and they paced out. They reconned the whole apartment. They knew what it looked like before they went in, and that's something they do. They rehearse. Now that's a very extreme experience.
Yeah, just not picking
The
up
principles.
on the baselines, not picking up on and then maybe a degree of complacency on the general's part, maybe just arrogance, perhaps too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, he wasn't thinking. He wasn't thinking the way we have been taught to think since then. For example, that tradesman's van across the street, the plumber or what have you. If he's sitting there eating his lunch for 3 or 4 hours, he's not eating his lunch, and he's not a plumber. That's So you pay attention to these patterns and see what means something to you, and then you take precautions accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a healthy dose of paranoia, and today you really need to have that because it's I mean, you can just go to YouTube, type in gas station assault or just something, whatever. Okay, I mean, it seems like every day we're inundated with these videos of just a guy there hanging out, pumping fuel in his car and getting mugged or the car being stolen or whatever, and it's just like what you were talking about. If you're looking at the video, you can see these guys coming, a mile away. They don't look right. They look like they're, getting in position around you. And this guy's he's oblivious.
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge. Now, before I talk about firearms, because that's a whole, area all unto itself, I will mention that I was taught from an early age, long ago, always have something in your hand, whether it's an umbrella, some kind of a stick, a rolled up newspaper even. A newspaper can be rolled around a stick, a heavy stick, something like a cut down axe handle. That way you've always got a weapon.
Yeah, man.
And then, know how to use something like an axe handle. It's not just used to swing, but you can use it like a pool cue and poke it straight in somebody's face. There's no defense against that. Nobody can see that coming. So there's that. Now, as far as firearms go, I've been carrying here in the United States since a early age, well over 35 years, in some of the most dangerous environments in the United States: Berkeley, California, Philadelphia, Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I've never had to even, display the weapon. Okay, because when you're carrying, you've got super situational awareness, because the last thing you want to do is, heaven forbid, actually shoot somebody, because then you got a body on your hands.
Yeah, lots of paperwork.
Yes.
Yeah. And for that reason, I actually carry insurance. In case I do shoot somebody, I've got legal insurance to cover myself. That's a whole nother category there. They provide training in that at various consultants provide training in that. I have, however, been approached by a weirdo at a gas station, and I did advise him, buddy, let me just tell you something. I've got a 1911, with 8 really good reasons why you just need to back off. And the look on the guy's face, and he's backing off. End of conversation. That's as hairy as it's gotten for me here in the United States. Thank God.
You're like, I don't mind spending a little bit of extra money on you, friend. These bullets cost more.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been around some folks that were able to take a bad situation and completely get out of it. Okay, with wicked skill, where they didn't have to engage them with a firearm or whatever. And that's something that you bring up, and it's really kind of important. But you have to, I think, some role playing and some thinking through things like that are useful. something as simple as, hey, buddy, if I give you some money, would you go get me some coffee and yourself some as well? And that throws people off. And there's just weird things that I've seen people do that completely diffuse the situation.
That's not a bad approach right there.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff where it's just like, wow, and these guys were doing protective security for, whatever, news media, whatever. And they were just able, instead of actually doing like bodyguard and having to get physical or threatening, they were able to, just like you do with a kid, I suppose, right? Just kind of change the topic, the misdirection, and off and you're gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Precisely. Back to some of the other control measures that you need to be considering, short of any kind of confrontation like that. Know the layout of the town that you're in. Do a little map reconnaissance before you go out. Know where north, south, east, and west is. Where are the major avenues and boulevards? Which way do they go, and which ones are which? And which ones lead to, say, areas of sanctuary, which might be out of town. It might be the airport. It might be the embassy district, the hotels. In South America, they have the Zona Rosa, which is sort of like a safety area, the party area, the cafes, restaurants, nightclubs, and major hotels. And then figure out, what are your handrails? Where do you not want to go? How do you tell which way is north when you're in a city? And I'll tell you one way you can do it. In many countries in the developing world, you'll see those satellite dishes all on the sides of apartment buildings and everything. Which way do they point?
Wow.
They all point south in the northern hemisphere. So even if you can't see the sun and the stars,
wow, man, that was some 40-pound brain stuff right there, Pete. That's good. I'm gonna pawn that. I'm gonna use that the next class and just make everybody think I came up with it myself. Right. That's awesome.
And then on top of that, think of what you need. If you're getting into a vehicle, let's say it's your rental vehicle. Might be a good idea to check they've got a spare tire in there, and the equipment that goes with it, for self-recovery. And in many countries, a first aid kit is required in an automobile. Does your vehicle have a first aid kit, and do you have a first aid kit?
Most people don't.
I don't think because people need to think through those things. Yeah,
exactly.
These are things our dads used to do.
That's right.
And then, my dad did. I know your dad did. And then over time, it's like,
we're so
yeah.
Well, we're getting back into the time where, life is challenging again. We're getting closer and closer to the kind of environment that existed in the United States during the Great Depression.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I tell a story. I think I read this in a book by Studs Terkel. And it goes like this. The farmer's lady was recounting the story, the farmer's wife, that during the Depression, people would come to the door and ask for food. Just vagrants, people who were wandering around because there were a lot of them. And they would ask for food, and she would say, come around to the back. And she'd prepare them a dish of food, and she'd take it to them. And one time a guy came and he said, do you have any food? I haven't eaten in 2 days. She goes, go to the back porch, and I'll bring you something. She brings him, a plate of potato and stew and pieces of bread and a cup of coffee. And he's sitting there on the porch eating that. She comes back in about 20 minutes. She says, how's everything going? And the guy's sitting there with his back to her, and he holds up the cup of coffee, says, the coffee's cold. And she said, just one moment. She comes back with the shotgun and says, get the hell out of here. Nice. And you have to be like that, because the guy is now becoming aware she's home alone. The men are out in the fields.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a hard world.
Yep.
And it's getting harder all the time. Well, a shotgun is a really good persuader.
Yeah.
You don't have to use it. You just have to display it. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, and people were way politer back in the 1930s than they are now.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. They just didn't keep as many statistics, so we don't know how many, extreme circumstances and situations went down. Nowadays we do.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
that's true. That's true. Yep. Yeah. The something else that you said that struck me is because you have, I don't know about you guys, but my wife oftentimes is driving around by herself.
Yeah.
And now my wife is she's packing heat. So, but a lot of wives don't, and so that's this is some good stuff. These are good tips to pass on to our wives to increase their survivability when they're going to say just to fill up at the gas pump. There's pain at the pump. We don't need to add
Yeah.
to it with some thugs. So just something like that could mean the difference. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Helpful hints for various family members, like with your kids and what have you. I mean, is there some things that are like that easy to teach that would help some of the young folks that are still in school age?
Um, Young folks are school age. Well, there's a lot more anxiety out there with the youngsters these days. I'm quite sure. Um, than it was in our generation, um, because of what you see on TV, on the media.
Yeah,
Um,
our big thing I think was tucking. I mean, we used to get under the desk and cover our heads or whatever. You remember that with the old Cold War threat of nuclear, thermonuclear war
I
type
never
stuff.
understood what the purpose was. I thought it was an earthquake drill.
Well,
I didn't know it had anything to do with an atom bomb.
You weren't supposed to think too much about it
Yeah.
because the other thing too is that little desk that we had wasn't going to be protecting you much against anything, but it was an exercise. It was just something I guess to make everyone feel like at least they were doing something, whether it was useful or not. But today, of course, that's not the threat. The threat now, I guess, on every kid's mind is probably some kid that is just going to go berserk and storm the school. So,
Well, then you have to ask, how common is that?
well, not very.
Well, let's see. Yeah, we've got a population of about 335 or more million people in the United States. And in the course of a year, approximately 40,000 gun deaths. Of those, half of them are suicides. About 25% of them are legitimate shootings, law enforcement, security, or hunting accidents. So that means we got about 10,000 gun deaths, which are criminal homicide. Most of those are gang-related, gangster on gangster, criminal on criminal type shootings, like what we see reported in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Chicago, New York, where hundreds and thousands are dying over the course of a year. So that leaves a very tiny amount are these mass shootings that capture everybody's attention. But statistically, what are the odds it's going to happen to you? Okay, so that should reassure a person, but that doesn't mean you don't want to prepare. Well, what can you do to prepare? Well, they talk about run, hide, or fight. And that is actually, good guidance. Run. If you're not there, they can't get you. Okay, well, what if you can't run? If you can barricade that door, statistically, it's shown, the studies of these events have shown the shooter will go path of least resistance, go to the next place, and fight. That's a very personal decision. There was a corporation I worked at it for a while. I was part of the security consulting of an international travel assistance firm, and we decided to make a security plan for what if we have an active shooter within our office. And generally it was like this: everybody else hide under your desks. Us security guys are going to advance on the threat and attack him with furniture, office furniture, because according to the rules, we weren't allowed to carry in the office. Well, very quickly we figured that's stupid because, if there's ever one of these events, we're going to go ahead and carry,
Exactly.
But but that was a personal decision, and we all knew we were doing it, and nobody talked about it. But seriously, the concept of just attacking and fighting using furniture as weapons, in a channelized building interior environment, you can blindside a gunman. Okay. Barricading the door, there's different kinds of devices, there's wedges, there's all kinds of things. It's easy to make a wooden wedge that can be jammed under a door, and that door cannot move.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using some kind of rubberized coating on that wedge. You can put anchor bolts into cinder block walls with a cable around it that goes around the doorknob. Now the bad guy cannot come in. So there's things you can do to harden the target, and public policy is struggling with the concept of having armed security inside the schools. Everywhere where they've had an incident and there's armed security, it's resolved very quickly. So to me, that's a no-brainer. But it's an emotional issue out there in the general public.
Yeah. Yeah. Israel doesn't have school shootings.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yep.
And they've got an active threat.
They do.
And now, Pete, I know that there's other things you could do, like you're going to a restaurant, and obviously, just back up from the actual attack. What comes to mind is that scene. Obviously, the Bourne Identity. He's looking around the restaurant, looking at things that could be used as weapons and stuff like that. So obviously, you would maybe you could just talk that through, like how guys should be looking at their environment when they enter that.
Well,
kind of just
that's interesting that you should point that out. I was stationed in Okinawa, and over there we're fully immersed in the Oriental martial arts, and we were developing these mystical samurai mindsets, right? And there was you got deep into it. I was there for 4 years. Yep. And what you do after a while, we had an exercise where you're in a room, and this is a personal training thing, and you're looking at the objects around you, and the common objects and what can be used as a weapon. Ashtrays used to be common. You don't see them so often. Glass ashtray is a missile.
Yeah, I hate to get hit in the head with that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Bar stools. I've personally cleaned out a couple of saloons with bar stools. Excellent weapon. Gives you standoff. A guy can't fight you when you're pushing a bar stool in his chest. Wow. And I'd rather do that than exchange blows to the head,
That's right.
Yeah. So we used to do that exercise precisely. But also, us snake eaters, we're notorious for going into a restaurant, sitting with our back against the wall, eyes on the front door.
That's right.
It's that whole thing. We're not paranoid. They are out to get us. Yeah, absolutely. We do that. And it makes good sense. But of course, you got to know where's the escape route behind you. And that would be through the kitchen, of course. And the kitchen, of course, is full of weaponry also.
Yeah. And you just, kind of spitballing here, you obviously are going to increase your survivability, umpteen-fold by just kind of taking stock of where you're at. Just basic essay. And then, because most people, like you started off saying, are just scrolling through their cell phone. They got their face. And that's just on a little bit of an aside here. Hey, guys, when you go out to dinner with your wife, put the phone away and just talk to her. And because she needs to know you give a crap. And if you're playing with that phone, it's just it's like you might as well not have gone out. Anyway, but as you're scrolling that phone, what situation awareness can you really have? You've got
Exactly. While you're on the phone, your situational awareness is zero. And beyond the relationship part of that advice is your job when you're out with your loved ones is you're the alpha wolf.
Yeah.
And you got to act like the alpha wolf.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
That's the one man PTS. Not PTSD. There you go. That's another
the
topic.
one man PSD with PTSD.
Nice, man. That's
Yeah,
good.
but absolutely, that's quite right. You want to have that. You want to have that 360 degrees and up going. You're in a public place, and the likelihood that anything's going to happen is almost nil. But if it does, that 1 second, that one split second that you've got, where it gives you a great advantage. Um, forewarned is forearmed.
That's it.
Let's talk about vehicles.
Yes.
Because we're in and out of vehicles all the time as part of the modern condition, and more often than not, we're driving. All right. There was an event in, what was it, Ferguson, Missouri, the Hands Up, Don't Shoot event, which
Right.
actually that didn't happen as Hands Up, Don't Shoot. The perpetrator, the young man, was, for whatever reason, assaulting a police officer who was in the car, seated in the car, and reaching in and trying to get the firearm, right?
Yeah, no big deal.
Off the cop,
Yeah.
which was kind of stupid. It defied logic, whatever. It ended up with the young man being shot and killed. And then, of course, we had all the political fallout and all the craziness that emerged after that. The real tragedy is that young man would still be alive today. It didn't require engaging with a firearm. You got somebody coming from outside the vehicle reaching in. Why don't you just hit the gas? Take your foot off the brake and hit the gas.
Yeah.
And then he'd just be doing somersaults down the road.
That's
as
a
you
great
pull
point,
away.
too, Pete. Is most people don't know that the vehicle is a weapon.
Absolutely, it's a weapon.
As I exfoliated myself at the beginning with I'm completely not. I have no SA, face in the screen. Somebody grabs the cell phone and the gas, with a combination of punches to the hand, dislodges the grip. So absolutely, yeah, the car's a weapon.
When you're behind the wheel of an automobile, an SUV, a truck, you're behind the wheel of a weapon that's killed more people than the atom bomb.
Yeah.
You have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, and we're not even talking Mad Max here. You don't have to go beyond Thunderdome. I mean, I just think, now, I mean, I hate to say this, but maybe I should. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't. But in Haiti, in the Haitian vacation, that often happened. We had guys be in the wrong place at the wrong time and get hit by a cut V, and their body just flying. But yeah, just the idea of knowing that the gas pedal, that is a line of defense. You can egress. You can.
Absolutely.
I mean, just the idea. Anyone that has training knows the amount of force placed at just the right place can pit a car.
Yeah, I think most of us probably train, teach our kids how to drive. But the one things that we usually teach our children is making sure you have a way out. Don't get your bumper all up on the car in front of you. Always be looking for your exit.
Yeah.
Looking around, what's going on. The cars behind you. Be noticing strange behavior. Hey, no need for the road rage. Just let the crazy guy go. Okay, you don't need to confront them. Just get out of their way. They're busy. They got someplace they're going anyway.
A soldier late for work.
Yeah, whatever. But
we used to. I actually covered that in the book. We used to train. You were there, I'm sure, Paul. With our vehicle teams and civilian vehicles. The first thing you do is open the hood and disconnect the sensor for the airbags, which is right in front of the radiator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next thing is with a vehicle, what's going to stop it or impede its progress? Let's see here. That would be if the radiator is somehow, punctured, Now the vehicle will eventually overheat and then it's going to stop. It'll lock up. So you have to be very cognizant of your radiator. The fenders and the quarter panels around the wheels, if they crumple onto the tires, at some point you don't have tires. Well, you've got 6 to 9 inches of air on your quarters, on the corners of an average sedan. And then the other guy has got 6 to 9 inches. So that's somewhere between 12 to 18 inches that you can use on either side of your car if you have to squeeze between two cars. Never mind, scratch the body paint; it'll buff out. So when you're at the stop sign, you give yourself at least half a car length between yourself and the car in front, but you're also looking, how can I squeeze out of here? I can jump that island to my left and get into the oncoming traffic and drive through them. They'll get out of my way. I can squeeze through, the vehicles to my right. You have to be thinking that way. You don't want to be trapped, because when you're at a stoplight, bad stuff can come towards you. I'm aware of a situation happened in South San Francisco, in a very rough part of town. And a friend of mine was driving down there, and he stopped. There's a crosswalk, and there was I think it was a stop sign. And, the passersby, the inhabitants of that area, they're kind of the challenged part of town. That's a politically correct way for me to say it. And boom, kicked the side of his car and fell down. So, of course, he gets out of the car like an idiot. He gets swarmed, and they're beating on him, right? This big, large, black gentleman, huge guy, comes up and is pulling kids off of him and throwing them aside. Saves his life. Picks him up, just says to him, "Don't ever get out of your car in this part of town." Puts him back in his car. Saved his life. So situational awareness, he would have possibly known this was a setup of some kind. Because he's at a complete stop. So why should, if it appears like there's a noise, a bump, and somebody falls down, why on earth would he get out? It didn't make sense, but he did. Yeah. So it was a setup. Well, that sort of thing happens. That sort of thing happens in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There's various streets around there where you cruise down that street doing the speed limit, which is 25 miles per hour, and they'll dump a refrigerator in front of your car. And now what do I do? Well, you plow right through that sucker. You're being set up for an ambush. Plow right through that. Do not stop.
That's right. Get off the X.
Yeah, exactly. Get off the X.
It's like something that I'm kind of hearing you say too, Pete, is having the situational awareness that is going to increase your survivability. It's like a balance between being paranoid and just present of mind. Just kind of being switched on, not so much, jittery and paranoid. I mean, there's I guess there's a good paranoid, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, again, like they say, it's you're not paranoid if they are out to get you. Paranoia is some kind of, I don't know, psychosis or something.
Yeah, it's probably
That's
not
where
the, it's
people
probably
have
not the right
an
word.
irrational fear. We're not talking irrational fear. We're talking a positive thing,
Right.
a complete situational awareness, really, because we're the trained individuals. And because we're trained, we have an inherent responsibility. People are going to be looking to us. And of course, that inherent responsibility and that training can work both ways, because sooner or later you're going to be in a court case and they're going to say, well, because you were trained, this didn't have to happen or whatever. Let the lawyers fight that one out. I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
Yes, well said, sir. Yeah, so that gives you, so let's see, you've got gas stations, we've got cars, we've got restaurants. What else could we, how else could we flesh out this topic, Pete?
Well, let's think about vacation. Okay, Americans like to go on vacation and then take a car and drive up to the mountains or what have you. And I've got a few anecdotes that I've listed in my book. And the classic one that stands out, I think this was Christmas 2015. There was a family from around here, actually, near where I live, and they were out west. They were in Las Vegas, and it was the day after Christmas, and they decided they were, husband, wife, and 12-year-old son. They were going to go and drive and see the Grand Canyon on December 25th. And so they took off in their car. And they very quickly became aware that there isn't a highway between Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon. It's secondary roads, which quickly become like logging trails. And in the wintertime, they are impassable. And by the time they found out that they'd, bit off more than they could chew, they tried to turn around.
Yeah, you're like National Lampoon's Vacation, just driving out.
They're doing a three-point turn on a gravel mountain road, and the rear tire went off the shoulder, and now they're stuck. And it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they've got no cell phone signal. And nobody knows that they were going there because they didn't ask any guidance from the local people. They were going off their little dashboard GPS, which says there's a road, doesn't say anything else about conditions or what have you. And so there they were. Now, a little bit of preparation and planning and common sense would have been go to the people at the front desk of the hotel and ask, hey, can we get from here to there? They would have been told right away, not in a car, you can't, not this time of the year. Okay. At least let somebody know where you're going. Have a proper map. Understand the conditions, because out west it's completely different than around here on the eastern seaboard, where there's been civilization since the 1600s. And so anyhow, it was a really bad situation. Then it got worse. They decided at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the wife, she was going to march her way out of there. Because the husband had a back injury, but she's a triathlete, so she'll be fine. So off she goes, right? And this is a true story. I've got the book open. I'm going to find the name in a moment. Well, what happened was Karen Klein, that was her name. They're from just about an hour away from me here. Okay. What happened was after she'd left at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is bad because night is falling, the husband looks at all this high ground around. What do they teach you in the Army when you don't have radio signal? Move to high ground. Right. So he goes to high ground, boom, he gets signal right away. An hour and a half into his little misadventure, and recovery has come. The local resources come and picked him up, and they got him out of there. Now they have to find her. They tracked her for 35 hours. There was snowfall, heavy snowfall. They got something like 3 feet of snow because there's a bit of altitude there. And so it's harder to track her. At the end of 35 hours, she was marching day and night. She was hallucinating. She lost a shoe. She ends up finding the entrance to a state park, and there's like a utility shed there, and she breaks a window and climbs in. It's probably colder on the inside than on the outside, and that's where they found her. And she was pretty close to death at that point in time. Yeah, dehydrated, frozen, everything. And fortunately, she fully recovered. It's a happy ending. The Klein family of Lehigh, Pennsylvania. She's a professor at a college up there, a community college, and of course, her specialty is
survival.
It's environmental studies and outdoor activities, and apparently that is it. Yeah, you can look her up on the school's webpage.
She's
she
a
got an
survival
education.
expert now.
Yeah,
a lot of bad decisions, poor planning, no planning, and lack of situational awareness. They didn't even have food, water, or blankets in the car.
Ouch.
Yeah,
that's a miracle.
That's the way I like to learn stuff. I just like to go out there and just step on it really hard.
Yeah,
It is the most effective way to learn things.
that's true.
But the smartest way is to learn from other people's mistakes. So
Yes.
that's what we're going to
Yeah,
try to do
other
here.
people's mistakes. Yeah.
Yep.
Don't be
Yeah,
hurt.
that breaks a lot of major rules of engagement, and it just brings to mind a couple of times where I haven't, back before you had cell phones, and the map and all that, just hit
Yeah.
something that tells you where to go. You had to actually get the atlas out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I had an atlas in the car. My dad had an atlas in the car. He planned the route, briefed us on the route. It was very militaristic. He did 26 years in the Navy. He was a Navy chaplain. But, he thought it through. That's great advice. And
How did we do it? How did we possibly? I remember driving down the road with, a gas station road map unfolded in my lap, my hands on the wheel, and I'm looking at that and looking at which exits to take.
Yeah.
How did we do it? I don't know how we did it.
Yeah, they say men can't multitask. Yeah, yeah. And my dad, he would plan the route, but he would never stop and ask for directions.
No, we don't do that. That's embarrassing.
So we do have our faults, but one of them was not planning the route. So that's absolutely awesome advice. And in the day and age where, as you say in your book, where we're looking at a point where the veneer of civilization is kind of becoming thin, eggshell
Very
thin. You said,
thin. Yeah.
and so things can go from bad to worse at the snap of a finger.
I'm assuming, Pete, you recommend that everyone probably has an atlas or something in their car.
Yeah.
Did you say an atlas?
Yeah, or some kind of map or something. Something to back up that GPS.
Backups, man, a pace plan, thinking through.
Something
at
that's
least
not electronic.
if you're
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because when they first came out with GPSs in the late 80s, the common rule of thumb was always never rely upon your electronics, use it as a backup,
Right.
track everything graphically the way we do it with map and compass. And the reason being is because the electronics will go down, the battery will die. Sooner or later, something with the satellite signal is, mitigated. So in any case, that was always the concept. Well, they're so reliable nowadays.
Yeah, and technology has made us all
Lazy.
and complacent, and we think, it's just down the road, and then, lo and behold, what could go wrong? The worst.
Well, I think it's also one of those things that you see with the younger generations is most of them just have zero familiarity with maps.
Yeah.
And that's really a shame because, it's not like they need to be an expert with the map, but do yourself a favor and throw a map down there and teach your kids kind of like, this is a map. This is what it looks. This is, the cardinal directions.
Do one.
Here's the
watch
legend.
one, do one, teach one. Yeah.
Teach them what, terrain, if there's terrain features on it or highways and stuff, and get them used to it.
I think we have a pretty good book on that.
Yeah.
Land navigation from
sooner
start to
or
finish.
later,
You can hit that.
Yeah, sooner or later, you're going to be a situation where you don't have your electronics. What happens when your cell phone, the battery on it dies, or somebody has stolen it, or it's taken a bullet, or what have you, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work anymore. Or, we've had the SHIT hits the rotating ventilator scenario. There's an EMP pulse or what have you. Yeah. When that happens, you can't rely upon electronics anymore. You better understand how a map and compass works. And I wonder about the young generation of Green Berets in the Q course these days, because the single biggest hurdle was land nav. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's gotten worse.
Using a GPS, that just makes it like, it's a finger drill. With a map and compass, that was extremely challenging. And we became renowned. Green Berets are renowned for their ability to find, an Easter egg in the middle of, some other country. We can really, know our way around and everything. It was part of our trademark skill.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder about the younger generation. What are they doing? because it's so easy to smuggle in a watch that's got a GPS on it and sneak around and use that.
Yeah.
And if they're doing that, they're only cheating themselves.
Right, and thank goodness that a lot of the cell reception sucks out of Camp McCall, but it's fun. It is because these guys usually dime themselves out because they're like doing circles and it's like their phone's not updating quick enough for them. But yeah, you brought up a great point on that. In the DoD, I just read this article not too long ago. The whole DoD is recognizing this problem, and I think they're trying to double down on land nav.
Oh yeah,
it's a great skill, and it's a great way to develop all kinds of situational awareness skills. It's just by all means they should be emphasizing this at all levels of military training, and civilians can get into it. Of course, there's different kinds of orienteering clubs and orienteering activities and training programs out there. And I'll just put in a plug for myself. If you want a little bit of training in land nav, come to me. I've got a plan. I've got it set up. I've got the class. One day I can teach you a great deal of skills. But yeah, it's a tremendous way of the whole ethos of my book, Survival Mindset. That one aspect of the Q course where you're out there in the woods for a day and a night. We do a practice. They gave us 5 days of training beforehand, and then some terrain walks, and then a day and night practice event, and then a day and night test. And it covered the better part of 2 weeks of land nav. And in that time, you become dialed into your environment so well.
That's it. You said it, dialed into the environment, not only in land nav, but before you go somewhere, as you're somewhere, keeping your head on a swivel. These are really good solutions to uncertainty, Pete. And I appreciate you drawing out the nuances of situational awareness and adding personal security in different forms. So fantastic time. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, my friend. And for just once again, a shout out to Survival Mindset. Okay, it's a book that you should have in your library. A lot of gems in there. It's a refresher for some, whole new things for someone else. So thanks again, Pete, for coming on the podcast.
Always a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Pete. All right, well, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Pinelander Podcast. If you enjoy our content, we hope you'll check out our sponsors, or even better yet, consider donating towards the American Agoge Project. Blacksmith Publishing has been serving the warrior class since 2013. Blacksmith Publishing has great titles written by warriors for warriors. So if you're looking for a great reference book or just want to unwind in the G-base with a great novel, be sure to check out the bookstore located at blacksmithpublishing.com. And if you're looking for some cool Pinelander apparel, head on over to the general store located at pinelander1776.com. Great selection of shirts, hats, jackets, and everything else. That's pinelander1776.com. And if you're interested in helping develop our country's next generation of warriors, consider the American Agoge Project. You can learn more about it through this podcast's platform at podbean.com. Until our next meeting, remember to keep your head on a swivel, stay mentally and tactically smart, physically and spiritually strong, and socially astute. God bless Pineland.